Hello everyone, Silver here and welcome to part 2 of my Thread Advanced tutorial series. I'm quite certain when some of you watched my last video about variables, they looked at the events I created and thought, well, why does he make it so complicated? There's an easier way for that. And well, you're absolutely right, but I did not want to put too much new stuff into one video, so I left one topic for this video, which is the when argument conditional sexp. Okay, so what is this type of conditional for? When you create a new event in Thread, you'll get a when conditional that has a condition branch and an action branch. In the condition branch, you put the condition that has to be fulfilled so that the action branch can then be executed. You can replace this when conditional, but for most cases you don't need to, because the when conditional is the most common conditional you will use in Thread events, but there are certain situations where another conditional is more useful, and the when argument conditional is one of them for one specific type of situation. In my examples for variables in the last video, I had the scenario that we have 3 cargo containers, and once those containers get destroyed, we want to have messages that reflect the number of destroyed containers. So we created events for each of those 3 containers. When the container is destroyed, then a variable is increased, and depending on the variable value, we play appropriate messages. For 3 containers, that is still kind of reasonable to create events for every single container, but if there are more containers, then it becomes quite tedious to create an event for each and every one of them. The same goes for my third example with the ships that get destroyed, so we can reduce the number of ships available for the next mission. There again, it would be easier if we wouldn't have to create an event for each and every ship that could be destroyed in the mission. And well, that's exactly the kind of situation when the when argument conditional is of use. If we replace the when conditional in our event with a when argument conditional, we have to fill in 3 branches. The first one is the argument branch. I will come to that in a moment. The second and third are the same as for the when conditional. It's a condition branch and an action branch. Since they basically work the same as for the when conditional, I will not go into too much detail on them. The argument branch or argument list is more important here. The basic idea behind the when argument conditional is that you can give a list of options and react on events on those arguments in one event instead of creating an event for each and every one of those arguments. There are several conditional operators for the argument branch that can change how that argument event works. The default one is any of, which means that as soon as the condition is fulfilled for any one object in the argument list, then the action branch of the event will be executed. There's also every of, which means, as the name suggests, that the event will be executed as soon as the condition is true for all objects in the argument list. There's also number of, which then means that you have to fulfill the condition for a certain number of objects in the list, and so on. So instead of creating events for each and every object, you have to create one large list of objects, which is the more tedious part of this exercise, because you have to give the list manually. Unfortunately, you cannot simply select the objects from a list of all ships, for example, like it is for other operators, because it is not clear for the editor which objects you might want here, since this conditional can be used for almost anything. So you have to fill in the objects one by one that you want for your argument list. What's the use of all of that? Well, in your regular condition branch for your event, you can now, instead of selecting one specific ship or object or whatsoever, you can use the argument placeholder. What happens then with the events mechanism in-game is every time it encounters this placeholder, it will go through the list of arguments you defined and check if the condition is fulfilled with one of those arguments. And depending on which of the operators you chose, then the event will be true if any one, if a number of, or if every one of those arguments returns true with a condition, and then the action branch will be executed. So back to our example with our 3 cargo containers. Instead of creating 3 events for each of the containers, we can now create one event that has our 3 containers in the arguments list, and can then create a isDestroyedDelay condition, and instead of selecting one of our containers, we can just select the argument placeholder, and in the action branch we put in our variable modification that increases the variable value by 1. And now we have the same effect with one event that we would have needed 3 events for without that when argument conditional. As you can imagine, this is great for any kind of event that has to consider a lot of different objects, but that has the same action branch for each and every one of them, like for example our variable manipulation here. And it helps you reduce the number of needed events drastically. Well, and that's about it for the when arguments XP. If you have suggestions or proposals for other topics I should talk about in one of those videos, please let me know in the comments. And that's it for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. See you again in one of my other videos if you like to. Until then, take care and goodbye!